Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Creating and Managing Quick Events. So before we dive really deep into this topic today, we'll go over just a little bit of housekeeping. So all of your phones are muted and all of your mics are muted. So feel free to enter your questions into the chat window. Today we have Devin, one of our ClubExpress team members, manning the chat. Devin's there to answer all of your questions related to quick events. So anything that has been a burning question for you, since you've been a ClubExpress customer, feel free to enter it into the chat window. Any suggestions that you have, any questions about enhancements related to quick events, feel free to enter it into the chat window. And of course, a recording of this webinar and all of our other webinars can be found in a couple of different places. You can visit the cool stuff page of clubexpress.com, click on webinars, and you can expand the recorded recent webinars menu to show all of our recently recorded webinars. You can also view our upcoming webinar schedule. And of course, we also have our calendar feature on our website. So if you go to clubexpress.com/calendar or just click on the calendar option in the menu, you can view a list of our upcoming webinars, register for the webinars, and get access to a couple of different things. You'll get a couple of handy handouts that will cover the topic that we're discussing that day. And you'll also have the opportunity to enter in questions that you would like addressed on the webinar. So it's a chance for you to, related to the topic, submit a question that you'd like to see demonstrated live, and we'll include that in our webinar. And of course, we also have not just a library of webinars, but we have a library of video tutorials available as well. So those video tutorials can also be found on our Cool Stuff page. And you can also find those video tutorials and webinars on our YouTube channel. So if you're not familiar, our YouTube channel is clubexpress.com spelled out. Feel free to hit that subscribe button when you're viewing one of our great webinars or tutorials. It's the best way for you to be informed when we post a new webinar or tutorial on our channel. Hit that subscribe button, click the bell so you get notified. And when you're watching any of our tutorials or webinars, you might notice at the top right-hand corner a little eye icon. So that's going to take you to some extra info related to the video that you're watching. So whenever you're watching a webinar or tutorial, we might touch on topics that we don't dive very deeply into. That little icon at the top right-hand corner is your key to accessing tutorials for those related topics. So make sure that you hover over that whenever you see it to get more out of the tutorials that you're viewing. And finally, we love reviews. So if you are using ClubExpress, and of course, if you are enjoying using ClubExpress, we would love to hear from you. Visit clubexpress.com/reviews and leave a review about us on any one of the sites that you see listed. Again, we would love to hear from you. So let's dive into our topic today. Today, we're going to be talking about quick events. So for those of you who are a little bit less familiar and maybe haven't used a quick event in the past, quick events are a simplified version of an event that you can create on your ClubExpress website. In your event calendar, you have a couple of options. You can create a full event, a quick event, or just a notification that sits on your calendar. Quick events were designed to be a simplified event. It's one page that you use to configure all of the event details for your organization. It's a one-page event that's all of the details that you can input for that particular event for your organization. It can be converted to a full event, and we'll talk about why that might be useful in our demonstration. Quick events are most useful when your event doesn't carry a fee. And we'll talk about why that's important. You can also allow members to create quick events without being an event coordinator, contact, or even a control panel coordinator. And with quick events, we have an RSVP option that makes it easier for your members to register. So just the overall idea here is that quick events are simpler for everyone. They're simpler for admins to create them, and they're simpler for your users to register for them. But of course, there are a couple of caveats. There are some things that quick events do not have that a full event does. So we've created just a couple of slides here for you to look at to really ingrain what you're sort of missing out on if you go with a quick event. But again, quick events are probably going to be useful for you if you have a lot of events that don't carry a fee, that don't have a lot of detail that really need to go into them. So when you're sitting down and you're determining, do I need a full event or can I just use a quick event? Think about a couple of options. What's the difference between a quick event and a full event? Well, with quick events, there are no repeating dates. The event can only be a single day. So if you are planning on creating, meetings that are repeating on a monthly basis, you could create them very quickly as a one-off using quick events. But if you like the idea of being able to create one event and just make copies of those events, a quick event may not necessarily be the right one for you. There's also no formatted description for a quick event. Now, you do get a short description that's 2,000 characters, and we'll take a look at what that looks like. However, if you are a fan of the formatted description that you can use with a full event, then a quick event might not be the right option for you. You can only have one event contact. So with a full event, you do have the ability to add more than one point person for that particular event. Whereas with a quick event, there's just one event contact. There's also a cancellation cutoff, but there is no cancellation policy. So you can implement a cutoff date and time, but without a policy. You're also limited to the default release agreement. So your release agreement could be a liability release agreement if you happen to be going whitewater rafting, or it could just be a photo release if you plan on taking video or photo at an event. So you would be limited to your default release agreement and registrant types. So when you're creating a full event, one of the great things about that full event is how many different registrant types you can configure for an event. You can separate out registration by committee, by member type, by a lot of different things. However, with a quick event, it's just everyone can register or only members can register for that particular event. So if you have events that are open to members only that don't carry a fee, again, quick events might be the event for you. As I mentioned, there is no fee associated with a quick event. If your event carries a fee, that kind of knocks out a quick event for you right away. However, there are still some useful options that you have with quick events, even if your event carries a fee. So stick around for that in our demo. There's no attendance tracking for a quick event. You cannot ask your registrants questions. So with a regular event, you are used to being able to ask questions per registration or per registrant. So you're not able to do that with a quick event. But of course, if you have questions that you want to ask your members, you can always push out a survey. There isn't a wait list that you can configure for a quick event, and there aren't reminders, but blast emailing is still available. And finally, unlike regular events, you cannot link a quick event to a volunteering opportunity. So again, some of these items, might be deal breakers for you, but quick events again are still pretty useful. And we'll go through all of the different ways that you can use them within our demo today. What can you do with a quick event? What are some of the benefits? Well, first, we have an RSVP option for easier registration. So when your members sign up for a regular event, a full event, they're usually going through multiple screens, at least about 2 or 3 screens before they are able to actually submit their registration. With an RSVP option, it's one click that the member submits and they register for that particular event. Members can also create quick events online and in the mobile app for specific categories. So you can set up all of those same categories that you're using for your full events and mark some or all of them to be used for quick events. So if you're concerned, about members being able to just add events to the calendar, of course, there's an approval process, and we'll go through that in our demo today. But you can also limit the categories that they can choose. So you can use the same categories that you're using for full events. You can even create separate categories to really just only use for quick events. They can be converted to a full event. And so we'll go through a couple of reasons why that might be something that's useful for you. You can run reports on those quick events still and create blast emails. And of course, member only registration is available. So if you're not separating your registration out by member type or by committee or any of those other options that you have with a full event, then a quick event might be right for you. Today, we're going to go over a handful of different ways that we can use quick events. We are going to set up a quick event as a save the date. So that is going to be useful for a couple of different things. If you have an event that's happening maybe in a couple of months, maybe in 6 months, and you want to maybe notify your members that this is coming up, set up a quick event, label it as a save the date. That way, when your members register for the quick event and you convert the quick event into a full event, which we'll go over, they'll get notified. And it's almost like notifying them that the event is up and running. It saves you a couple of emails. We'll also set up a member only virtual meeting and we'll utilize blast emailing to notify our members of that meeting. And then finally, we'll take a look at what it's like to allow your members to create a quick event with approval. And that'll take us to talking about your quick event categories. We'll talk about creating a quick event through the mobile app. And again, we'll talk about blast emailing. So I am going to just quickly navigate to our demo club. This is our Northwest Balloon Club run by Martin Smith. Martin Smith is the administrator. So right now, we're just going to take a look at creating quick events as an admin. I'm logged in as Martin Smith. And I'm going to select the control panel to take me to my event calendar. In the website tab, under events, I'm still visiting the event calendar. Both the quick events and full events are located in the event calendar. So right off the bat, I am going to, on the right-hand side of my screen here, select the add button to create a quick event. But before I do that, I want to point out a couple of things within the search feature. So a lot of us will visit our search feature and maybe not put a lot of thought into it because automatically all of our event types are checked. So it's going to show us everything that we've created and the statuses that we care about the most are checked. Now, all of these are checked by default. But if I'm looking to just quickly go through some quick events, which we'll take a look at shortly, I might want to consider unchecking every single event type, only checking quick events. I can go ahead and select search. And now I can see just a list of all of my quick events that I've created. So let's go ahead and add our quick event and we'll take a look at what that screen looks like. Now, if you have not previously created a full event, or if maybe you looked at it once and it seemed a little bit intimidating, you may visit this screen quite often. But if you haven't, you'll see here that it's just separated into 3 sections. So let's start off at the top with our basic information. Right at the top, we're entering in a title and a description for our quick event. Now, both the title and the description are going to be visible to members and non-members, depending on the visibility settings that you've set up for that particular event. So I'm going to call this a save the date. And the save the date is going to be for our New Year's Eve party. So I'm going to call this save the date, New Year's Eve party. And in my short description, maybe I want to let my members know that this particular event is not the actual event. This is only a save the date. And that registering for the save the date will generate an email for them once we actually add the full event to the calendar and open it up for registration. So we'll take a look at how I've configured some of those description items in another event. But for now, let's move on to some of the other options that you have here. So again, we're configuring this as a save the date. All we're doing is putting this quick event on our calendar so that we can then save time for ourselves right now. We don't have to configure the full event right now. We'll do that later. Because what we're doing is we're creating our quick event. We are going to convert it into a full event and then use that as a basis for expanding that full event, adding that formatted description, adding fees, and so on. So right now, I'm going to state that the status for this particular event is active. I can always set the status to pending approval if I'd like someone else to take a look at it. Under my categories, so as an administrator or as a coordinator with access to the event calendar, I can choose from any event category that I'd like. I am not limited to the event categories that I have noted are for quick events as well. And we'll take a look at categories later in our demonstration today. If you are a member adding a quick event to your calendar, you will only see the categories that have been noted to be for quick events. So, again, as an administrator or coordinator with access to the event calendar, you're not limited by the categories that you've selected to be for quick events. I'm going to say that this is a social event. And because the Northwest Balloon Club is configured to have subgroups, we're just going to say that this is for the entire club, not just a subgroup. Next up are visibility settings. Now, our visibility settings are relatively similar to that of a full event. I can say that this event is visible to everyone. And again, remember that even in the case of a quick event, visibility is not the same as registration. So when you're figuring out who can actually see the event, that's different from who might be able to register for the event. So I'll say that this event is going to be visible to members only. It's a members only party. If I am using the mobile app, I can also note the mobile channel that this event is for and my contact person. Now, my contact person is pulling in the person who's creating that particular quick event. I can change that person if I'd like. Right now, I'm logged in as Martin Smith, and I'd like to remain the contact for this particular event. I can always remove Martin Smith and select a different member from the database, followed by the information that I'd like shown about that contact person. Again, very similar to the event that you might create that's a full event from the event calendar, and whether or not I want to be notified on registration. Now, for a save the date, I don't need to be notified on registration. I'm doing this for the benefit of my members. I'm not doing this necessarily for the benefit of me as an administrator, except that it saves me a little bit of time right now. It saves me that time that I would be putting into creating that full event. Maybe I don't have all the details just yet, but I do want to let folks know that that date is coming up. So I want that save the date on the calendar. Next up, I'll actually configure the date. Now, this is a save the date. I'm going to configure it as the actual date of the event for a couple of reasons. One, I want my members to know when the date actually is. And two, when I get ready to convert this quick event into a full event, I want that date to carry over. So I am going to select New Year's Eve, and we'll go ahead and change our time here. We'll say that the party starts at 6, and let's say that it ends at 11, followed by our registration. Our registration options are going to be the same as your registration options for a full event. That is, whether or not registration is required. So the first few options we're all used to seeing. Not required and recommended. That's really not going to get you, very much in the way of an attendee list or a registrant list. Requiring registration is what you would want for a save the date. Because again, when you convert this particular quick event into a full event, you're going to want that registrant list because you're going to email everyone who has registered for that event so far to let them know that it's been converted into a full event and registration's now open. Next up, required by close date. A lot of those other options we've gone through in other tutorials and other webinars that talk about creating events and what each of those registration options means. But one of the new ones that I want to highlight would be an RSVP option. So if I select RSVP only, you have a handful of different options to configure how your members and even non-members, if you're opening this up to non-members, will register for this. So you get to say which responses do you allow? Yes, no, or maybe. If you're looking to get a really hard head count, you might want to leave off the maybe part. Next up, whether or not you'd allow comments. So if your club or association that's maybe hosting a rather informal event, maybe you're hosting a potluck, you might want to allow comments so that people can note what they're bringing. Or if you are hosting a virtual meeting, you can leave comments on so that folks can maybe input when they might be joining the meeting. They might be able to input maybe some agenda items that they'd like to have added to the meeting. And my RSVP scope. So that is where I'm determining who can actually sign up for this event. Everyone or active members only who can see the registrant list. So this again is going to be very similar to our registrant list visibility within a full event. everyone can see the registrant list, members only, or just members who've registered. I am going to go back and say that registration for this is just required. I will allow cancellations. So again, we'll see that I do have that cancellation cutoff date and time. However, I don't have that cancellation policy that I'm including here. I'll say that the cutoff date and time for this, let's say, is going to be the end of October. By the time I create this full event, I can always change that cancellation policy, but at the very least for my quick event, I'll just give them until October 30th to go ahead and cancel that. Is capacity of the event limited? Now, this information will translate over when you convert this quick event into a full event. Keeping in mind that if you set capacity, it's going to carry over. I am going to leave my capacity empty because when I go to configure my full event after I've converted it, all I'm going to do is just quickly update a handful of those fields. But I don't want capacity to be limited for my save the date. I want everyone to be able to register for this so that they get that email and they can throw this on their calendar. Whether or not I'd like to enable quick release using that default release agreement. And again, we have other webinars and tutorials that go into a little more detail about our quick release function. And then finally, we have that location information. So the location information is going to function the exact same way that it does with regard to a full event. I have my drop-down list of frequently used locations on the right-hand side. I still have the ability to show that map link and to even show a location website, which will come in handy when we set up a member-only virtual meeting. I've configured a lot of my settings here. We've gone through all of our information. We went through our basic information, our registration, capacity, and then we talked about our location info. I'll go ahead and save this and let's take a look at how my screen changes. Now I see that my quick event has been saved. So the actual page that the event is on looks a little bit bare bones. And that's probably because you're used to seeing maybe a formatted description as part of your event. So let's take a look at the right-hand side and see how our screen may have changed a little bit. You're used to seeing many of these icons. There are some icons that are going to be missing. So for example, we wouldn't have a wait list or an attendance icon. We don't have notes that are available with a quick event. What do we see here? We have this additional icon. It looks like a magic wand. That's your key to converting this quick event into a full event. So if I select this icon, I'm prompted to confirm my action. And right away, my screen changes only slightly. I can show my admin options on the right-hand side. And now I've converted that quick event into a full event. So let's take a look at what that looks like once we already have registrants. So I'm going to go back into my events manager and I'm going to repeat the same process for my save the date winter holiday party, which is configured as a quick event. So if I edit that particular quick event, it's going to take me right back into that blank quick event screen. On the right-hand side, I can see my quick event tools. I'll select that magic wand one more time. And I'm prompted to confirm my action. And an email gets sent out to all of my registrants to let them know that that particular quick event has been converted into a full event. So I have 4 registrations already. If I show my admin options, again, I'm looking at the same screen that we'd be looking at if we had configured this event as a full event from the start. All of the information that you entered into the quick event has now been saved and just plopped into all of the fields for that full event. We have our basic information, we still have our event contact, and now we get the benefit of being able to add additional contacts. So a couple of things that you can do here. I can go back into my basic information, edit my basic information, and at the very bottom, I can go in and re-add all of those panels that I'm used to seeing. So I can go in and add my formatted description. I can determine that I do want to ask a couple of questions. Maybe I do want to configure some additional information for my reminder emails. And I'll go ahead and save those changes. All of those items will return to the full event. You can go in and add any of the information that you may have missed out on when you created that quick event. And of course, when we go ahead and hop right back into our admin panels, we do still have the ability to send emails for that particular event. So, a couple of things to consider again when you are hosting a large event and you want to maybe just get it on your calendar, or you want to give your members a heads up that that event is happening, especially if you have events that have a limited capacity. You want to give your members a heads up so they can be ready to register as soon as that event hits your calendar. So let's talk about a couple of other things. Setting up a members only virtual meeting. So what I'm going to do is pop right back into my event calendar. And one of the benefits of having a quick event or adding a quick event is that the button for adding a quick event is right on the face of the calendar. Now, as an administrator or coordinator, you will always see that button. If you are allowing your members to create quick events, they'll see that button as well. If you are not allowing your members to create quick events, they'll never see that button. So, as an admin, it's just really easy for me to navigate to the event calendar. I don't have to go back into the event calendar administration screen. I can do this right from the calendar itself. I can go ahead and add my quick event, and I can call this my member meeting. And we'll say for new members, meet the team. So again, a lot of this information is going to be the same. Now I can do a couple of things here. We're setting up a virtual meeting. So I have a Zoom link or a GoToMeeting link, or maybe it's a Google Meets link, any of those links. There are a handful of different spots that you can put that link into. So let's think about where we would want to put that. If this is a member only virtual meeting, it's for new members. I probably am going to, let's call this a Meets. And I'd probably say that it's only going to be visible to members. So that helps me out in a couple of different ways. I've opened this meeting to all of my members, and it's visible to members only. Because of that, I can go ahead and scroll down to my location section. And under location website at the very bottom of the screen here, I can go ahead and use my link builder to add in my Zoom link, my GoToMeeting link, any one of the virtual meeting services that you might use. I would select external page as my link type, enter in my external link, and then choose what I want that link to display as. So I might call it Zoom meeting or GoToMeeting, or maybe just make it into a button that says join the meeting. So that's if you want to enter that link in your location information. Now, that location information is going to be visible in the event itself, regardless of whether or not that person has registered. So if you want to maybe encourage folks to register for the event, or get ahead of a problem that you might have, which is that folks might not register, they would just show up for the meeting. Instead of putting that information in location, I can enter into the short description, register for the event, details to be emailed 24 hours before. Now, my members know that they register for the quick event, and I'm going to send them out those details. And of course, I'll use blast emailing in order to do that. I've taken a look at my event information here. We'll go ahead and say that this event happens in about a week, and registration is required. We're not going to allow cancellations, and we're not going to limit capacity. Once I'm done with this particular event, I'll go ahead and save it. I have my quick event saved. I'm not going to convert this into a full event unless I really need to. But on the right-hand side, because we still have access to blast emailing, 24 hours before my event, I can send out an email including all of those meeting details. Now, my event is happening next week. I'm probably not going to remember to go back in and send that email out. So what I can do is go into my blast emailing right when I create that quick event. And what I'm going to do is just add an email And I'm going to configure that email to actually get sent out the day before the meeting is supposed to happen. So we've talked about blast emailing in a lot of other tutorials and webinars that we've gone through. So I won't go through the items in detail. Of course, we have our basic information where you're configuring who that email is coming from, what the subject line might be. If I go into edit basics, that's where I'm configuring my subject line. So I can call this meeting link and details. And I'll say that I want to send it on a different date. So my meeting is supposed to be on the 2nd. Perhaps I'd want to send this out on the 30th or the 1st. I'll say the 30th, just in case members have questions. They have a couple of days that they can email me, and I'll go ahead and save those changes. So now all I have to do is configure my distribution list and add content to my email. And of course, if you're not already familiar, blast emailing within events, whether they're quick events or full events, they're your friends. So all of the distribution lists that you see at the very top of the list are exclusive to accessing blast emailing within events. The first dozen or so are just related to that specific event. So play around with those the next time you have an event and you're trying to send out a communication to members or non-members. You might surprise yourself with the options that are available to you. So for my particular example, I just want to email everyone who's registered the meeting details. So I can say everyone registered for this event, which is my very first option, and add that to my distribution list. Now, to answer your question, when that email gets sent is when the registration is going to be determined. So just because I'm configuring this email now, it doesn't mean everyone who's registered for the event today. It means everyone who's registered for the event when that email gets sent. You're going to capture everyone who has registered for the meeting up until a couple of days before. So that's setting up a members only virtual meeting and using blast emailing in order to communicate that information to your members. Next up, I want to talk about allowing members to create quick events with approval. So we're all aware that you have a handful of different levels of access to your site. We have administrators, which are people who can do everything across your site. And then we have coordinators who have that limited admin access. But you may not want to make more than a handful of members a coordinator for the event calendar. So instead, you can allow members who do not have coordinator access to configure quick events on their own and even run them through an administrator for approval. So let's talk about a couple of settings that you would configure in order to make that happen. I'm going to go back into my control panel and visit events from the back end as an administrator. And on the right-hand side, I'm going to select configure and event defaults. And the first thing that we're going to take a look at is how we allow our members to create those quick events. So if you're not familiar with our event default screen, it's a place where you can configure a lot of time savers for yourself. So for example, at the very top, we have our default event panel settings. These are all of those panels that you'd see when you're configuring a full event. If there are a handful that you do not use ever, or 90% of the time you're not using them, go ahead and uncheck them. It'll save you a couple of clicks every single time you create an event and save yourself just a little bit of time. So if I scroll down under my events section, which is about towards the middle of my screen here, we have a handful of options for quick events. Can members create quick events? If you select yes, you're then prompted, is approval required for quick events? If you select yes, who do you notify when a quick event has been created? You can enter more than one person. So that might be your list of coordinators for the event calendar. It might be just your event director who gets notified every time a quick event has been created. Letting your members create those quick events, noting that approval is required, and entering in the proper email addresses separated by a semicolon of who should be notified when that event gets created. Now let's talk about our categories. So I mentioned that you can, of course, configure categories for all of your events, and you can even note which categories are going to be available for quick events. So if I go back into my configure options under event categories, On our category administration scene, I'm seeing all of the categories that I've created so far, whether or not those categories are available for quick events. So we see that there are only 2 categories that are available for quick events, and we'll come back to that. Our color scheme that we've chosen, the ability to edit those categories. Now you're seeing the trash can icon for a couple of those categories. That just indicates that those are the ones that you can delete. You cannot delete an event category if it's being used to define an event. When I talk about the categories that are available for quick events, you'll probably remember that when I created that quick event at the top of our webinar, I had every single category available to me. And remember, as an administrator or coordinator, you have access to all categories. You're not limited to categories that are being used for quick events only. So if I add an event category, I'm naming my category. I'm entering in my background color, my text color, whether or not I'm enabling it for member quick events. So again, it's whether or not the member can use that category to define a quick event. So I can use the same categories that I'm using for my full events for quick events and just check that box off. Or I can create an entirely separate category, perhaps internally let my team know that certain categories are only to be used for quick events and not for full events. And then finally, I can limit registrations per member. So that's just an extra option that you have if you have a category of event where you only want members to maybe attend 3 of them in a quarter. You set the number and you set the date range. So that's something that you can learn a little bit more about in some of our other tutorials and webinars as well. Now, let's go right back into our events manager. So we've taken a look at our default settings. We've made sure that we are allowing our members to create those events, and we've set up those categories. So let's take a look at what that process looks like. We are going to now have a member add a quick event, and then I'm going to switch back into Martin Smith's shoes, and I'll go ahead and approve that event. So I just have opened up our demo test club in another browser, and I'm signed in as Colleen Carter. So Colleen is just a regular member. She does not have coordinator access. You'll see that she doesn't have access to the control panel at all. Colleen's going to navigate to the event calendar. And again, because we are allowing our members to create those quick events, we have that add quick event button at the top right-hand corner of our screen here. So if I select add quick event, as Colleen, I'm going through the exact same process that an admin would go through. I might want to say that we are having a safety committee meeting. And I can add my short description. Just for timing purposes, I won't, but we're adding a safety committee meeting. Perhaps Colleen is one of the co-chairs of our safety committee, and she's been tasked with just throwing that meeting on our calendar. Under category, again, Colleen only has access to the categories that the administrators have noted are available for member quick events. She can only see 2 of those categories. So she'll classify this as a committee meeting. We can also change all of our visibility settings and our registration settings. So you'll see that Colleen is noted as the contact person. Of course, that's because Colleen is actually creating the quick event. She can change that if she'd like. And of course, the administrators can also change that. Whether or not to show any of her info to the folks registering for that particular event. She can also change the visibility settings. So we'll say that it's visible to members only. And Colleen does want to be notified when folks register for this meeting. We'll note when the actual meeting is. And for this, we're actually going to use our RSVP function. So I'll say that I'm going to allow all of our responses for RSVPing for that meeting and available to active members only. And we'll also allow members to view who's actually registered because it's a small committee. And then finally, we can enter in that location information. So if the location is going to be an in-person meeting, we can go ahead and enter that. If we want to sort of combine a couple of the tips and tricks that we've learned here, and we want to be able to send an email out with regards to that meeting information, keep in mind that in order to use emailing within the event calendar, The member also has to have access to blast emailing. They have to be a coordinator for that function. They don't have to use an email to disseminate any of that information. There are a handful of other ways that they can get that info out there. But just keeping in mind that even if you're allowing members to create those quick events, they won't be able to, use that blast emailing feature unless you've given them access to blast emailing. And that goes for your event contacts as well. So I'll go ahead and save this. And now Colleen will see my event has been created and it's awaiting approval. So where does Colleen go from here? Well, Colleen can go ahead and edit the event that she's created. We can see already all of the RSVP response options that we have. So I'm going to switch back over to Martin Smith being logged into our demo club. So I'm logged in as Martin Smith now. We'll go back into our event calendar and I will just quickly navigate to the event administration screen here. And now I can do a couple of things here. I can quickly scroll through the list to try and find the event that Colleen created. But what I'm going to do is up at the top here in my search function, I've already selected quick events. So I'm only viewing quick events from within my calendar. And I am going to only look for those that are pending approval. So that pending approval status is what you want to look for quick events that need to be approved and put on the calendar. Until I hit that approve button or until I, change the status of that quick event, as we'll go through in a moment, that quick event's not going to appear on the calendar for members. Now, I already know that Colleen has created that event because I did it myself, but Martin Smith gets an email or whoever is noted in that section in your event defaults will get an email noting that an event has been created, and then they just go right back into the calendar. So I'm looking for events that are pending approval. I'll go ahead and select search, and we have our one safety committee meeting. The status is set to pending approval. We can see that that's that quick event categorized as a committee meeting here. So the approval process is really simple. As an admin or an event coordinator, I can select that edit icon. And what I'm going to do is go in and edit the event. So I'll edit my quick event. And we'll go ahead and change that status from pending approval to active. Now, you'll recall that when I created the event as Colleen, I did not have a status option. The status was automatically set to pending approval because it was a member generated quick event. So I'll go ahead and select active as the status for this meeting. I'll scroll down and I'll select save. And now my quick event has been saved, it's been approved, and it's available for my members to register. Now, quick events are also available within the mobile app. Now, our mobile app is available as an extra cost. Our mobile app is different from being able to access your site from a mobile device. Your sites are all going to be mobile friendly. The mobile app is just an extra feature that some organizations have adopted. If you're interested in the mobile app and its functions, we have a great tutorial and webinar available on the topic. So let's talk about what we have gone through today. So we've gone through setting up a quick event as a save the date, where we converted the quick event. We can send out those automatic emails to let all of the registrants know that we've converted the event. They can put it on their calendar now, as opposed to waiting until the administrators have time to create that full event. We set up a member-only virtual meeting, and we utilized blast emailing to make our lives just a little bit easier and automatically send that meeting link out right when we create that event. And then finally, we took a look at what it's like to allow our members to create those quick events with approval. Before we talk about some of the questions that we've had today, let's talk about some tips. Audit your categories. So if you haven't quite used quick events very much, or maybe you've only used them a handful of times and you want to start using them, go back through your categories and determine how you want to set those up. Do you want to use the same categories and simply mark certain categories to be used for quick events? Or do you want to create a whole new set of categories that maybe have quick event right in the category name? It's entirely up to you. But go back, check that box off for the items that you want to be included in that list. You don't have time to create a full event, add a quick event and convert it. That's going to save you a little bit of time on the front end. And it's going to allow your members to put that date in their calendar, have that date in the back of their mind. And do you need to ask questions, but you really want to use a quick event? Consider a survey. We have tutorials and webinars available on our survey module. It's a module that's included on all of your websites at no extra cost, located in the communications tab. If you are not using surveys, maybe take some time to test that out, especially again if you want to ask your members questions related to an event or that are part of the event. Consider that survey option. And remember that quick events are really great for events that are for either everyone or members only, events without a fee, and where you're not tracking attendance. So we probably didn't think that I could say so much about such a small screen. But Devin, how are we doing on questions related to quick events?
Yeah, we've had a handful of questions. I've been able to get to a few of them. The most recent, someone was asking us to go over the automatic emails that get sent out when someone registers for a quick event.
Yes. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of our system emails. So under our communications tab, under system emails, that's where you're going to find a lot of the emails that are being sent with related to all, as it relates to all of our events and all of the quick events. So every time you are setting up an event, it is going to generate an email every time someone registers for that particular event. When you are converting a quick event into a full event, you'll get a pop-up that states, do we want to email registrants or members who have registered? And what that does is it sends out an email to everyone who is registered for the quick event and lets them know that that event has been converted. I don't believe that it is an email that you can actually configure. I believe that that's a system email that is not configurable. See, we had a lively group today. So that's always good to hear. We love your questions and we love your suggestions. So feel free to keep them coming. And while we wait for a couple of other questions, I'll just reiterate that we do have a calendar feature. The next webinar that we are going to be hosting will be ClubExpress for cycling clubs. So that's going to cover some of our modules that are really devoted to cycling clubs. We're also going to go through some tips and tricks. If you're interested in what those webinars might look like, we recently did a webinar on events for ski clubs. So that just went through the process of creating one of those multi-activity events that people tend to have a love-hate relationship with. We went through it, made it seem a little bit easier, and kind of walked through some of those more pressing questions. So be sure to check out that calendar. And even if you're not a cycling club, pop into the webinar because we do have a lot of tips and tricks that are useful across club boundaries, as we like to say. So we have a couple of questions that came in. Does making something a full event automatically add it to the website calendar, which is tabbed? I'm not totally sure what you are referring to when you say tabbed. However, quick events and regular full events are automatically added to the calendar regardless. So a quick event is always going to be on your calendar, even if it is just an RSVP option. The only time a quick event would not appear on your calendar right away is if it's a member created quick event and you have not yet approved it. And we have a suggestion of a save the date listing having unspecified time ranges. That's an interesting suggestion, and we will make sure to get that to our developers. Oh, Ken updated his question here. So the question was whether or not those quick events or the full events are shown on the coming events feature. So I believe that you're talking about the upcoming events widget. And yes, quick events will show on the upcoming events widget. That's a great question. All right. Well, it looks like the chat has died down just a little bit. So I want to thank everyone sincerely for their time. We always appreciate your attendance and your participation in our webinar. We love having you. The recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel within a couple of days. So look out for that to appear on our YouTube channel. And of course, subscribe and hit that bell for notifications so you get a notification right when we post it. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you in the next webinar.